good evening, everyone. I'm really sorry uh, because of these power interruptions. We lost like half an hour, and today the session is grounded theory. And thank you very much, the Faculty of Graduate Studies, for inviting me to deliver this special session on the grounded theory. And we have like almost 100 participants from different batches, as I was informed. 2022 mostly. Great. Okay. So I'm Manoj. I'm attached to the Department of Tourism and Hospitality Management, Rajarata University of Sri Lanka. And I really interested about the qualitative research and different dimensions of the qualitative research. And I have my own line of work to explore these different dark corners of the qualitative research to give a kind of a theoretical values to it, especially in the Sri Lankan context, in the Asian context, or maybe in the post-war context. So during the session, we shall be able to discuss a little bit about them as well. Uh, so I have a little disclaimer to make because the content we will discuss today is purely based on my own experience on the grounded theory, and there's no absolute truth in social sciences. We have to understand that, and we have to accept that, and it rather depend on how well we define, refine, rectify, and justify it. And the examples I'm using are purely based on what I have learned as important in not only in qualitative research methods, but also on how to communicate it and develop quality of the content. So I'll be using sometimes different methods, techniques, and uh, since we are conducting this particular session online, I just wanted to change the entire presentation of my these 48 slides because to make it more kind of presentable to the audience here today. And again, remember that you are free to hold different opinions about the research and the knowledge and knowledge creation, right? Different epistemologies and the dissemination as knowledge is also based on a lived experience. So sometimes my school of thinking might be different to yours, right? But we have to accept the differences in different schools, and we have own way of thinking, and you might have your own way of thinking, and your professors, your lecturers, your mentors might teach you, maybe will show you different paths, and I might show you a different path today, but the ultimate goal or ultimate destination of all of all of us is just one goal, right? To climb this big mountain of knowledge. So before jumping into the grounded theory directly, I want to touch a little bit about the qualitative analysis landscape, actually what we are searching for in the qualitative research, and why qualitative research is not very popular in the Sri Lankan context. Because there are many reasons behind, but mostly the students, let it be the undergraduates and the masters, so the MPhils or the MBAs, right? MScs and the PhDs, right? All these students mostly move into the quantitative methods with the assumption that the quantitative research methods are easy, right? And because you have all these pre-tested variables, pre-tested hypotheses, and it's all about, okay, you give some questionnaires and getting the data, and you enter into the SPSS, MOs, or the smart PLS, and showing the relationships or the impact kind of a thing, and okay, there, boom, okay, you get the answer. But remember, the qualitative research is a different dimension of knowledge. In the qualitative research, we shed the light into some areas where no one has studied before. That is why in most cases, qualitative research seems to be taking the guise of inductive research, right? It becomes an inductive research in most cases. And not to mention, okay, yes, there are deductive approaches that we use in the qualitative research, and there are inductive approaches we are using in the quantitative method. That's a different story to discuss. But predominantly in the Sri Lankan education, undergraduate, postgraduate, the PhDs, right? We totally, we are like 90% we are based on the quantitative methods. And again, from the university side, we have some resource limitation, and sometimes our supervisors might not know about it, our lecturers might not know about it, right? So we need to break the ceiling and go forward and identify what is out there, what is out there in the qualitative analysis landscape. There are different philosophies, there are different methods, there are different approaches, there are different softwares, there are different analytical tools, and we need to have a kind of a holistic understanding of all these things when we are touching upon the qualitative research. I'm sure you have studied some basics of the qualitative research. I know that you know the difference between the qualitative and the quantitative since you are into the postgraduate level. However, it is a kind of a prerequisite that before you touching upon, you know a little bit of the content analysis and the thematic analysis, right? In Sinhala, we call it the Pramanatmaka Vishleshane, Thema Vishleshane, because the grounded theory is the last theory, or sometimes we can say last methodology I would rather teach to my students, right, in other places. So please have a kind of an idea about the about the content analysis and the thematic analysis, and thereafter you will get the holistic view of what it is grounded theory and how it is different from other qualitative data analysis methods, right? So it is very much important. And why qualitative research? Why qualitative research? Because it will give you, it will enable you to get an in-depth understanding of the social phenomena within their natural setting. In-depth understanding of the social phenomena within their natural setting. Let it be a village. Okay, let's take, for example, a village context. You see some phenomena, there's some cultural things are happening, or there are some distinct behavior of the villagers that you need to study upon, right? And you get in there, you totally adapt into that village culture. You observe it, and then you might be able to get something out of it. And it is very hard that you distribute the questions and get in it, because from the context to context, the research data might be different, right? And again, the type and the nature of the data sometimes, okay, from qualitative, so from quantitative, we cannot solve everything. We need qualitative research methods equally, and it focuses on the why rather than what of social phenomena. Why? Something has happened. We are asking the question why. You get an answer. We again ask the question why. You get an answer. You again keep on asking the question why for maybe 5 times. Right? Then you can get into the deep-rooted problem of the social issue or the social phenomena that you are talking about, right? So we focus on the why. Right? It is not the what thing. The what is the what is something that you see in the surface, right? You go to the beach, you see the boats, and you can count the boats. Okay, how many? That is quantitative. But underneath, okay, what is there below? Okay, you need to have a qualitative observation to identify what is there underneath. So, okay, in the surface, okay, it is very calm, it is very quiet, but in qualitative research, we deep dive, we immerse into the data, we try to see the meanings behind the words. So the theory is like grounded theory, right? Is empowering you, strengthening you to identify the hidden meanings behind those terms, phrases, situations, phenomena, etc. Right? And again, the qualitative research relies on the direct experiences of human beings as meaning-making agents in their everyday lives. That is also important to understand. And here, the what, why, and so, right? In qualitative research, I told you we have to pay attention to the why question, why it happening, why it happened, right? And thereafter we have this important question to answer. So what? Right? So you need to assume, you need to guess, you need to combine this situation with other political, economical, environmental, other social elements, and then make an educated guess, right? You need to compare, your situation with the situations in the other countries, whether similar incidents has happened in other countries, whether similar scenarios has been happening, right? You need to compare in comparative tone. Thereafter, you come to your discussions and the findings, right? So these are the boundaries of the qualitative research that we have to talk. We have to understand basically. And again, when we are doing a qualitative research, remember the you are important. You, yes, not me. You are important because unlike the quantitative methods, there is no hard, fast rule in the qualitative research. If I ask you to run the reliability or run the validity of a particular statistical data set, I'm sure you know what commands to perform in the SPSS. But in qualitative research, it is not like that. We have different methods depending on the research context, depending on the data sources, depending on the type of analysis you're going to use, depending on the time frame. It is different, right? There is no unanimity between one research to the other. They are different. Because why? The situation here in Mehenthal is different to the situation in Anuradhapura, to Kurunagal, to the Kalambu, to the everywhere, right? So remember, this is your study. This is going to be your study and your choice of methodology. It is totally up to you. Your supervisor is not going to help. It is not his or her responsibility. It is your responsibility. You need to justify the selection of your method. And you are the interpreter, and you consider them as important, right? I always tell you this, tell my students this example. When I take my students to, I'm from the tourism industry, tourism field rather. Okay, when I take them to the Kandy, the temple of Tutreli, and I make them enjoy the morning Tevava, or maybe the Tevava at 10:30 to 11, right? And I ask them to observe it. And I individually question them, okay, what did you observe? And some people talk about the drums. And some people talk about the, whatever this, horaneva, the other thing, whatever this flute. And some people talk about the distinct, the dress of the Nilame. And some people talk about the food which is going to offer to Lord Buddha, right? See, it depends on your interest. And you think it is important, this particular element is important, after you getting into a kind of a social situation. So it is totally you. It is subjective. It is subjective. Therefore, your examiners, or if you are going to submit a research into a kind of an index journal, they will question you. They will ask because it is different to your opinion. And you need to justify your research methodology and your choices, and you have to be unbiased and stay closer to the data as much as possible. The Albert Einstein once said, not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts, which means that it is impossible sometimes to measure what is important. It is impossible to measure what is important, right? You have so many elements of data around you. You have the newspaper articles, you have maybe the recordings, you have the photographs, you have the field note, you have the memos, this and that and everything. Okay, but sometimes it's hard to understand what is important. And sometimes it is difficult to measure what is important. And measurements are likely to be incomplete. Measurements are likely to be incomplete. I have another experience with one of my supervisors during my master's, Professor Sarath Kotagama of Columbia University. I was doing this study about community-based tourism, and I really wanted to do it in a quantitative way, because I didn't know much about the qualitative research by that time. It was 2013, I think. So I was trying, and Professor objected. No, Manoj, you have to follow the qualitative methods. You have to implement. You have to analyze the data qualitatively. But I was trying against, but finally he turned around and said, Manoj, if a tree is a tree, why do you need statistics to prove it is a tree? If a tree is a tree, why do you need statistics to prove it is a tree? Rather, you can explain its leaves. You can describe its branches, you can describe its flowers, you can describe its fruit, you can describe its trunk and the root and the shade you get and the birds living in it. Right. Okay. So in qualitative research, sometimes people get this big question. So what to do in qualitative research? So how to develop the argument in the qualitative research? The answer is that you explain the features. You get a car. You what constitute a car? You have the wheels, you have the windshield, you have the steering wheel, you have this, you have that, right? You have to explain those things. Then it will constitute your unit of analysis, right? So the other important question, when to use the qualitative methods? If you do not know what to expect, you have to use the qualitative methods. And if the cause is unknown, you have to use the qualitative methods. I'm rushing up here because we have lost some time. And if the data involved with experience, meaning, and perspective, or the standpoint of the participants, basically we are using the qualitative methods. And if you cannot give a numerical value to the data, okay, we have to use the qualitative methods. And if the numerical values are not strong or sufficient enough to explain a phenomena, you have to use the qualitative method. And importantly, finally, if the research problem is about an unattended social issue, again, you have to use a qualitative research. At this point, if you're a seasoned researcher, if you're an experienced researcher, your intuition will guide you. Your intuition will tip you, will show you the path. Okay, man, you have to follow the qualitative method here, right? The quantitative method is nice, it's comprehensive, it's compound, but it will not be able to give you all the answers you need. Sometimes you have to use the qualitative methods. So why grounded theory is so popular among the researchers? There are different reasons behind. There are influential key concepts that came with the grounded theory. The Glass and Strauss came up with something. Glasser and Corbin came up with something else. And the Chalmers introduced something else. So now we are looking at different versions of the grounded theory. I will teach you the grounded theory, right? I will explain you the grounded theory after this slide. But why grounded theory is popular, that need to be understood. That I want you to understand that, because it has the coding function. Coding is that you identify the most important emerging pieces of data. It's like, I'm from Ratnapura, I'm from Balangore to be precise. So my father was a gem businessman, and when I have the time, when I had the time, I used to go to his gem pits to see how the men work. And usually when they go for these precious stones, they have this garungwat here. I don't know this English term for that, and they do this thing, right? They go to Garanama and in search of the gem, right? So coding will help you to find the gems. So you have to go through lots and lots and lots of data, right? And then you categorize them, you code them, right? Then thereafter you have to go for the saturation. Saturation is the point where new data is not recorded, right? And again, we have this concept like constant comparison, which means that you interview number one, thereafter you do go back home and you analyze that, and secondly you interview the interviewee number two, you develop the transcription, and then you analyze it and you compare it with the first one. And when you get the third person, okay, that transcription is also compared with the first and the second one, like that, constant comparison. So there are influential key concepts that emerged with the grounded theory. And the grounded theory is again important. It is very popular because it provides detailed methodology about the data sources, how you selected the data, why you selected this data. You need to provide a good justification for selecting this, why not that. right? And the collection method, how you collected them, and the analysis method, what methods you used, right? It is also there to understand. And again, the computer aided assistance is there nowadays. During the last decade, the use of the computer aided software go like, right, my goodness, it go very popular globally, not only among the qualitative researchers, but also among the quantitative researchers, right? And sometimes people start the in vivo. Sometimes people start with the Leishman's softwares, or sometimes people start with the QDA software, right, which are qualitative data analysis softwares. And then they understand, wow, okay, that these softwares have been developed using the grounded theory. So I need to look into the grounded theory. I need to study the grounded theory, right? Now, grounded theory has been developed in such a way that it could be converted into software, and the software developers identified a lucrative opportunity in the academia, and they did it nicely. And the NVivo is one of the most promising and most comprehensive and very strong coding software that you can use to apply the grounded theory. So according to Glass and Strauss, actually it was introduced by the Glass and Strauss way back in 1967. They said the earliest definition for the grounded theory is a qualitative research method that uses a systematic set of procedures to develop an inductively derived grounded theory about a phenomenon. Okay, it's a qualitative research method. No need to explain that. That uses a systematic set of procedures, systematic set. There's a way to collect the data, there's a way to transcribe the data, and there's a way to analyze the data. Before analyzing, you have to go through a systematic procedure, starting from the open coding. Thereafter, we come to the focus coding or the category development. And thereafter, we have the actual coding or theme development. These systems are there. And finally, you need to develop theory grounded on the data that you collected, grounded on the processes that you performed during the earliest stages. And the grounded theory is a strong inductive research method for discovering new theories. Sometimes the researchers are saying, okay, I hate this method, I hate that method, I cannot do. And there's no way out of my research. I need to invent a new methodology. Okay, well, you're welcome to the grounded theory, I would rather say. You need to come and learn some grounded theory, right? Because the grounded theory will give the direction, will show you the path, but it will not take you to the destination. It will lay a strong foundation for you to build up your own house. So it is very much important for advanced learners like you, right? If your academic curiosity is very high, and if you have the needed commitment and the dedication to contribute to the body of knowledge, the grounded theory is a perfect match for you. And the data collection starts without the formation of an initial theoretical framework. That's another key feature of the grounded theory. Let it be a quantitative research or a qualitative research that follows a deductive approach. We basically we hammer out, we find almost all the research papers, right, available with the Elsevier database, with the Sage database, right, with the Springer database, with the Emerald database. We download everything. We download like hundreds. How many? Maybe thousands. Some of you, maybe thousands, right? And then you start reading. Yes, I know, maybe 2 or 3, isn't it? Right? But you preserve your downloaded research paper just like a gem. But remember, in the grounded theory, if you are going to frame yourself with some previously the explored theories or the concepts, you will not be able to develop something of your own. So in grounded theory, it is not very much recommended, right? It is not prohibited, but it is not very much recommended for you to develop an initial theoretical boundaries. No, Now, here in the grounded theory, remember, we have to go beyond the boundaries. You need to expand an existing theory. Maybe you need to challenge an existing theory, or you need to develop a new theory. That is the ultimate purpose of the grounded theory. And it is not simply a methodology. It is also an epistemology. Why I'm saying that? Why I'm saying that? Because it is concerned with the nature of knowledge and the possibility of knowing the truth about the world. It will give you the wings to change your perspective of the people, of the society, of a social phenomena, and you can develop your own way, and you can analyze it, and you can interpret it, and you can develop a theory based on that. So it is an epistemology, the way of generating the knowledge, the way of understanding the knowledge. The grounded theory is revolutionary because it is inductive. Grounded theory is never deductive. It is never deductive, right? If you're saying you're using grounded theory, right, then welcome to the inductive reasoning. And the ultimate goal of the inductive approach is to generate theories. And the data analysis takes place during the data collection. Wow, yes. But how about the quantitative research? You do the pilot survey with maybe 50 to 100 sample. You come back home, you enter the data into the Excel or maybe the SPSS, you analyze, and then you report the findings. If everything is okay, you conduct your normal in the general or the usual data collection with maybe 300 to 500 to thousands of samples. But in the grounded theory, and mostly in and again in the thematic analysis as well, you analyze the data during the data collection process. During the data collection process, you go to the field today, you collect the data, you come back home, you transcribe it, you get the printout of it if you want, and then you analyze it. And the second day also, you go back, follow the same steps, come back, you analyze it. Third day, fourth day, fifth day, till you reach a saturation. You need to be doing this. You need to be doing this. And again, grounded theory is revolutionary because it is against hypothetical deductive view. The, the grounded theorists or the qualitative theorists do not believe in deductive view as a as a as a way to generate new knowledge. No, the high in hypothesis, in quantitative research, basically you try to show the impact, the relationship, and in between variables, in between two variables, two or more variables, and you check this and that quantitatively. But again, that is highly criticized in the qualitative researchers arena, that they say that how do you possibly quantify the human emotions, human feelings, human understandings, and the human perspectives? No, no, it's not very much welcome in the qualitative researchers world. I'm seen, well, I'm also a lecturer. I also do lectures at the Sri Lanka Institute of Marketing. Whereas there are a lot of marketers, like just like you all, like hundreds of students join for the lectures. And when we give them a small assignment, okay, go and do this, go and do this assignment, or collect some feedback. Okay, most of them, they develop the questionnaires with a Likert scale, 5 point or 7 point or maybe 11 point kind of a thing, and trying to uh, uh, frame the responses into the knowledge that we have already discovered, right? Because why? You give you make an operationalization table in the quantitative research. You have the variables. Someone else invented it. Someone else found it. After you have the dimensions. Someone else found that as well. And then after you come to the indicators. And yes, you have a little freedom to reword them according to the local context. And thereafter, you do the testing. What is new there? Absolutely nothing. So the grounded theorists, they challenge that, right? They say, no, the generation of the new knowledge should come qualitatively by interpreting, by observing, by interpreting, by giving a value to the social phenomena, to the meanings, or to the incidents, to the conditions, to the strategies that you observe during your research. And the grounded theory is focused on theory building, nothing else. Theory building. There has to be a theory, if you like, and if your theory is strong enough, and if the world is ready to accept it, you can give your name. You can give a name for this particular study, for this particular theory you just created or you invented. And the key elements in the grounded theory, number one, is a constant comparison. Constant comparison. Compare what with what? Number one, you can compare the data and data, data versus data, data and concepts, concepts and concepts. You have one data, okay, yes, the Rapunzel, I think. Okay. You compare her with Chinting, right? Data and data. And then you try to develop a category, kind of a concept, right? Okay, the cartoon characters are there, right? Making the children happy. The happiness concept is there. Psychological concepts are coming, right? And more data is coming. Okay, the Snow White is coming. Then you keep on comparing the data versus data. And suppose this is a concept, right? And you check whether these two characters constitute or is represented by the Snow White. You have to check. Oh, okay, here we go with the Superman, right? The concepts versus concepts, right? We have the data, we combine the data together, we make the concepts, and you have more concepts, and the concepts are getting bigger and the larger. Concepts are getting bigger and the larger, and you keep on comparing the concepts as well, right? So that is known as a constant comparison. As I remember somewhere, uh, the grounded theory was initially named as constant comparison methodology. Uh, if I'm correct, if my memory is correct, I read it somewhere. The Grass and Stratus, they considered naming it, but later on they moved into the constant comparison, the grounded theory name. And another key element of in the grounded theory is that there's a strong focus in the research process. Here, we adopt the sensitizing concept, which means that in grounded theory, when we are building up the arguments, we have this provisional or the temporal guiding concepts. We make assumptions, okay, make in the make marathon. This has happened due to this reason. And thereafter you go, you suppose you go on a trail and you find a big area full of mud, and you need to jump over, you need to cross the road without getting yourself mud, right? You find a stone, you put it into the center, you put one step and jump over, right? So that is sensitizing concept. In the grounded theory, we make some assumptions. Okay, make a maybe in the okay, this has happened due to that reason. Because why? This is interpretatism. We are following the interpretatism research approach. Okay, the researchers have the freedom to make the assumptions, right? So it is temporal, guiding concept. It is not stoned. It is not stoned. It is not like a kind of an inscription, right? It's not going to be forever. And in the grounded theory, We keep on testing and searching for deviant cases. But in quantitative research, the deviant cases, my goodness, no, the extreme cases, okay, everyone is saying yes, but one person is saying no. You're doing a study about the school children attitude about something, okay, like 99% is saying yes, one boy is saying no, having a poor attitude towards something about the school education or maybe about the textbooks. And what do you do as quantitative researchers? We remove it, isn't it? We call it the data cleaning. But remember, in the qualitative research and again in the grounded theory, we pay much attention towards that deviant case. What is different? That is that could be the most significant finding of your research. And again, in the grounded theory, you have to keep on writing the memos. Why memos? When we go to the field, when we interview the people, you will get some hundreds of beautiful ideas. You'll get the ideas. And it will show you different parts of your research are making. Okay, and this is going to relate to that theory, this concept, or the case study of Vietnam or Guatemala somewhere, right? Okay, so you need to have the memos in your hand, right? And all these things will help you to build the theory, right? And it will help you to create a transparent methodology. How you have developed these things using some uh, multi-phase data, sources, and again different analytical methods again, right? And again, in grounded theory, it is more reflecting of what? Reflecting the research context, right? We have to be the voice of the voiceless in qualitative research. We have to be the arm of the armless, right? So you see a particular research problem, you find it as important, and your thesis should be a reflection of that particular research problem. Your research, not necessarily, you don't have to provide the solutions to a problem, but you have to make some educated analysis or insights into that particular problem and to identify what really happened there and then why it happened there. The cases, deviant cases, right? We remove all these things, isn't it, in the quantitative research. And in grounded theory, we have the question of sampling. I briefly explained it earlier. In quantitative, even for the pilot study, we collect the data from 50 minimum. But in qualitative, how many interviews to conduct? That's like almost every day I get this question, how many interviews to conduct? Actually, we do the sampling through theoretical sampling until the theoretical saturation is reached. It doesn't matter whether you reach the theoretical saturation with 10 interviews, maybe with 5 interviews, or maybe with 15 or 20, that depend according to the research problem and the research context. Sampling has to be done through theoretical sampling. You have to, generalize into the theory, not to the population. In quantitative, you try to generalize into the population, not to the theory. But here, we reach the saturation with 10, right? Saturation into what? Saturating into the theory. And the quantitative, small sample from the population, and then you generalize it. But in qualitative, small sample, and you interpret it, and you are going to relate it to a theory. And the theoretical saturation is theory so sophisticated that new data no longer creates more refinement. It will not make any sense. So this is the point where you have to stop collecting the data. But in your dissertation or in your research paper, you have to clearly mention it when you reach the saturation, when you reach the saturation. And another important element in the grounded theory is that the creation of a theory, creation of a theory. The theories that are connected, grounded in the data. The theory should represent your data. The theory should represent the case. And how about applying the theory into different contexts? Well, we are going to talk about that as well. When you come to the principles in the grounded theory, number one, the theory should be grounded, which means there's no theoretical framework, nothing else. There's no predefined set of variables, indicators, items. No, no, no. You have to keep your mind free. If you're going to spoil your mind with some theories, it will it will frame your analysis. It will limit your analysis. Then you will be automatically, your sight will be automatically covered with a kind of a shaded glasses. No, the theory should be grounded, and please keep the kind of relevant theories, concepts away a little bit. Please conduct the interviews of your own, right? Having the research objective in mind, having the research problem in mind. And thereafter, you will be able to get some sparks in this data, some light in this data, right? And that is the point where you have to visit some of the literature. Then you can check whether there are similar sparks in other research. This type of sparks, if you again pink sparks, check whether pink sparks are available with other research. The theory can be refined by further data collection. So in a grounded theory approach, data collection and analysis should be iterative, the constant comparison of data and theory approach. We use the theoretical sampling, we spoke about it, and avoid the conceptual baggage. And sometimes we have seen, mostly now at the other place which I mentioned earlier, when the professionals, yes, they're very busy and they are doing a wonderful work to the industry, but sometimes when they are going to build up the theory, okay, they often get messed up. Why? Because they have been in the industry for so many years, right? Perfectly experienced, perfectly qualified, and when it comes to theory building, they have this conceptual baggage. They think this is a result of that. This is a direct result of that. So having that in mind, they go for the data collection. That is wrong. That is purely wrong, right? So we need to avoid that conceptual baggage when we are doing the grounded theory. And the theory emerges through immersion in the data. Immersion, what is immersion? It is like you plunge into the data, you dive into the data, right? And you're going to feel the data all your body. You're going to feel. Assume yourself jumping into a swimming pool. You feel the water, right? Each and every part of your body will feel the comfort of the water. So even in the grounded theory, when you're dealing with the qualitative research, qualitative data, you need to feel the data, and you will then hear what the data has to say and the call of the data. And then you will be able to identify, okay, this particular set of data need to be in this row, in this table, in this box. Oh, that data into the other table. So you immerse in the data and the development of a coding framework that is entirely based on the structure of the data. And encourage not to conduct a literature review. Yes, we spoke about it. And then the data analyzing technique is similar to the thematic analysis. Whereas we start with the open coding and we go for the focus coding. And thereafter you come to the actual coding or the theory development. That is the place where we stop the theory, thematic analysis. After developing the themes, But in the grounded theory, we go and we combine the themes based on the theory to, give a birth to a new theory. Okay, I will touch the content analysis here a little bit. In content analysis, you do the open coding, the first level of data, and thereafter you go for the focus coding. You do the open coding and you combine the similar open codes and you call it the focus codes. And at that point, if you're following a content analysis, you have to stop collecting the data. No, sorry, you have to stop analyzing the data and you have to start reporting. That is the content analysis. And if you can combine the focus codes together and make it the themes, or we can call it the actual coding, that is thematic analysis, one step ahead of the content analysis. And then we have the grounded theory, whereas you combine the themes and give a birth to a new theory. That is 2 steps ahead of the content analysis and 1 step ahead of the thematic analysis. However, if you have some complex data, you can go for different steps. Open coding level 1, open coding level 2, open coding level 3, and then you can come to the focus coding. Yes, that is possible. However, and again, there are some misconceptions about the grounded theory. It is not an excuse to ignore the literature. Although you're following the grounded theory, it is not an excuse to ignore the literature. It's basic. That is why we are highly recommended grounded theory for the kind of seasoned researchers, seasoned qualitative researchers. Those who are aware of the content analysis, those who are aware of the thematic analysis, or those who are basically aware about the narrative analysis, all these other small descriptive analytical methods, we recommend in the grounded theory. Because then why? When you are aware, when you have sufficient exposure to different research methods, you will feel that, okay, I'm competent enough to follow the grounded theory, and these are the frameworks I have to follow, and these are the guidelines which will take me to my final destination. So you will feel how it should go. So that is basically the tacit knowledge, and myself and your coordinators and your lecturers cannot give you that. No, we cannot give you that, right? You need to develop this sense of understanding how what this data is talking about, and whether it can develop a theory or not. By looking at a couple of transcriptions, if you're a seasoned scholar, you will feel it. And it is not presentation of raw data. No. Sometimes people will put the direct quotations adopted from one individual respondent, or the second respondent, or the third, and with lots and lots of quotations. They say, okay, this is grounded theory. No, that is wrong. It is not about presentation of the data. We don't need to see the direct quotation. Instead, I want to see the coding table. I want to see the coding hierarchy. Have you come to this decision? What is your level 1 coding? What are your information pieces, right? And how did you group them together? And then how you categorize them? And then why you combine some of the categories to make the themes? That is what I want to see. And then how you combine the themes to make the theory. That information need to be produced. So it is not simply presentation of the raw data. It is a rather complex process. The analytical process and the coding table or the coding hierarchy has to be presented. And it is not theory testing, content analysis or the word count. Because why? Now we have the in vivo. Now we have different, like dozens of qualitative data analysis software, and it will help you to do the word count analysis, word frequency analysis, word cloud analysis. It will help you to search for particular phrases themes, words to the in vivo. But in the grounded theory, it's not sufficient. You can provide, of course, you can provide those data as some ancillary data, or maybe as some annexures. Well, okay, the reviewers and the examiners will recognize, okay, will just not recognize, they will not, okay, data on it, okay. But when you're reporting the data, you need to provide the analytical approach, and you have to show how you have analyzed it, right? So, and it is not theory testing, it is not the quantitative method, it's not theory testing, it's theory generation. And it is not simply routine application of fixed procedures. Okay, you say, right, the Strauss and the Corbin, they said that, okay, eggshell coding has to be followed, right? Open coding should be like that, like this. Categorical coding should be like this, and the eggshell coding like this. And then you say, okay, I just following this method recommended by the previous scholars. No. That is also not recommended. That is also not recommended. If you are going to be a qualitative researcher, you have to you have to walk away from the routine application. You can take the Strauss, Corbin's, their findings, or their writings as a guideline. And if you like, and if you think you need to bend the curve, yes, you can bend the curve. There's no fixed procedure. There's no fixed procedure in the grounded theory. Everyone accepts that. Everyone has to accept that. And it is not perfect. It is not perfect at all. It is messy. It is very, very messy. Sometimes you start collecting the data, you keep on analyzing the data, and you develop your coding hierarchy, the open coding and the focus coding, action coding. And after conducting like 4, 5, 6 interviews, you'll feel that, okay, my goodness, I'm far away from reaching my objectives. What are my objectives and what are these findings? My goodness. No, you will get carried away sometimes with different research contexts, with different stories. Now, our people, I mean, if you're not a very strong qualitative researcher, you will look at the manifest content of the data. Manifest content of the data means the observable content of the data. But if you're a successful researcher, you need to look at the latent content, the meanings behind the word. It is the meanings behind the word that gives you the idea, or gives you a support you to generate a theory. So you need to have fantastic knowledge, and you need to have a feel towards your data. Assume a blind man. Whenever you give him a currency note, a 10 rupee note, or maybe 20 to 30 to 100 to 500 to 1000, 5000, right? He'll quickly feel it. He will touch it. He will recognize the unique symbols in it embedded into those notes, and he will say, okay, this is that. So you as a qualitative researcher, you need to develop that sense of identifying the data. You need to identify the data in such a way. And the grounded theory is not easy. It is not easy, right? So far, I haven't seen a single research paper that has successfully employed the grounded theory methodology in their works. I have seen some papers, but no, I would not give any mark to such papers. I'm not an expert. No, but still, we need to pay more attention about the construction of a paper using the grounded theory with the light of the guidelines provided by previous scholars. And the other important thing, what data can be used in the grounded theory? Basically, the interviews, focus group discussions, the audios, videos, images, books, discussions, newspaper articles, speeches, formal or informal conversations, advertisements, all the blah blah. And remember, there's no rule of thumb in data. If you think, okay, the the the, the, the sound of the birds are an important data source to you, well, it's all yours. Yes, you can consider that as well. There's no rule of thumb in qualitative research about the data sources that can be used in the ground theory. It's your research, remember, your set of data, and what you need to do is the justification. So in grounded theory, I told you, we need to do the coding. We need to do the coding. So when we have a long transcription of interviews, of a focus group discussion, or a group interview, maybe, you have transcriptions and you have to start doing the coding. Coding is the process of identifying the key and emanating or very important data or pieces of information. So when you have a bigger data set, it will take you a lot of time to go through each and every line, because we have to do the line by line reading, and to identify, okay, the open codes. We call it the initial coding or the open coding. The large quantities of raw qualitative data are focused and labeled during the level 1 coding. Now, in one of my studies, we identified 1,310 initial codes. And in the level 2 coding, we identified the focus codes, 61 focus codes or 61 categories. So what is this 1,310 and what is this 61? All these 1,310 were attributed into this 61 focus codes. මෙසේර 1310 මේක ඇතුළට දාලා focus codes 61ක් හදලා තියෙනවා. And the next step in the grounded theory is that you need to combine these focus codes together to make the actual coding. And here 16 actual codes have been developed. And then you can further group them together. And here you have developed 4 overarching themes. And finally, on top of that, here you combine all these 4 together, make it a theory. So this is what Strauss and Juliet way back in 1994 recommended for the qualitative researchers. And at the very beginning, when they were in love, the Glass and Strauss way back 1967, during the first book, they identified they introduced the method, which method to be followed in grounded theory. It began with the theoretical sampling, moved into the open coding. Then we come to constant comparison during the analysis phase. And then we have the memos to consider. We can develop the diagrams. We can develop the concept maps, project maps, another blueprints if you want, because it will show you where the development of your research, your argument, your key concepts, your key categories, and the themes through diagrams. Then you come to the actual coding or the themes. And finally, we have the theoretical saturation that leads us to the theory generation. So this is the simple method that which was introduced by Glass and Strauss in 1967. So this coding thing, I've been talking about this coding so long, but what is really coding? I told you it is identification of pieces of information, but it is more than that. what to code in your transcription, what to code in your data set. You have to code. If they repeats, if the same idea is appearing again and again and again, you need to code it. You need to highlight it and you need to identify it. And if the data surprises you, you need to code that. And if the data state explicit facts or the statements, you need to code that as well. And if by any chance, if it is kind of relevant to a research work you have read before, you have to do the coding. And if it reminds you of a theory or a concept, you need to do the coding. And finally, again in qualitative research, the intuition part. If it intuits you, you will have a feel for the data, and then you have to code it. Right. Then we have the versions of grounded theory. Any questions so far before moving into the versions of the grounded theory, because that's a complicated area? Anything to ask? I did not ask, I did not give the time for you to ask the questions because we lost some time and there.
Sir, shall I ask a question? I'm Dileepa.
Yeah.
So you explained that we are reducing that codes up to the 4th level.
Yeah.
That means that is the theory level.
Yeah.
Now, at the initial stage, it is 1,300 or something. So then, yes, 1,300, that is the initial, but the people are repeating the ideas.
Yes.
When you come to the 61, that is based on the researchers' knowledge or identification. You are identifying some codes are equal. Is it something like that?
Good question.
Reducing it to 61?
Good question, Ms. Dileepa. According to Green, 2007, he said, when our open codes are exhibiting similar characteristics, it is an opportunity for you to group them together. It shows you similar characteristics, similar features. So how can we identify these similar features, similar characteristics? That is based on the research context. For example, I'm doing something about the agriculture, my study is about, and many people are talking about, say, the bananas, say, the mangoes, say, the pineapple, this and that. They are my open codes. All the names of the fruits are going to be my open codes. And when it comes to the focus codes, the parental code that I give or I identify is the fruit. So into the fruit, I put all the names of the fruits, all the types and the varieties of the fruit. Then instead of like dozens of fruits I had on my table, I have this one word, fruit. So likewise, you come to lesser codes. You develop lesser codes by grouping them together. And again, when it comes to a social, if it is a kind of a social research, if it is relevant to a kind of a theory, maybe the discrimination, the violence, gender violence, discrimination based on the, say, the skin color, the language you speak, or your wealth, your parents' education. Okay, you have a lot of data reported from the school students that you have engaged in, that you are collecting your data. Okay, you have like hundreds of them. Then we can get this mother term discrimination. See, so from hundreds, then again, you come to one. So that is how we keep on adding, we keep on combining and go to the next level.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any question?
So I have I need a small clarification.
Yeah.
Hello. So you said you recommend this theory only for the seasoned researchers. So most of us are new to the field. So what option do we have?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Sirisena. Yeah, it's Well, how to give the answer? It's like this. This grounded theory is really a messy thing, and the theory development is it's a comprehensive process. Because if you start the grounded theory, if you're going to apply the grounded theory in your research, the ultimate result should be a theory. It has to be a theory. And now the other question is that, are we competent enough to understand the theory yet? What are the features of a good theory and how to generalize it and how to use it in different contexts? There are different aspects of it. But if I don't know, maybe you are at a like MPhil level or the PhD level, but for the PhD students, yes, I can recommend the grounded theory because that's a kind of a new paradigm. You are going to change your entire life during these 4 years or 5 years of the PhD journey, isn't it? So for such students, yes, I can recommend that because you have the time, you have some time to do the trial and error, right? And that is the learning process. That is the learning process, right? So I actually, during my PhD journey, I had a couple of objectives, and I used the content analysis, thematic analysis, and the grounded theory to to complete my dissertation successfully, because I did not feel confident to stick to the grounded theory because I felt that okay, I might not be able to complete that successfully. So I was using this methodological triangulation method, which means I'm not going to stick to one method, but rather a few, which helped me out of my, to make, to realize my dreams. So that is the recommendation I can give you, Mr. Sirisena.
Okay, thank you, sir. I understand the issue. Okay.
And in the meantime, let me add a little thing. You need to know what is content analysis, what is thematic analysis before you are going to touch the grounded theory. It is important because they are kind of related, and the steps that you have to follow in the content analysis and the thematic analysis and the grounded theory is kind of similar. It's like you are going to Colombo from Anuradhapura, okay? And if you're going to follow the content analysis, you're going to stop in Kurunegala. Like on the way, you stop. And if it is like thematic analysis, you stop maybe at Rambukana, right? That is thematic analysis. And if you go to Colombo, okay, that is grounded theory. So you need to follow the first 2 steps before moving into the grounded theory.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions? 1 more minute and thereafter, yeah. Right, okay. Now we can go ahead. Right, the versions of grounded theory. This is a nice part to talk about. Why? I have been working as a reviewer to many, like so many Sri Lankan journals and many international index journals, the social science citation index journals, corpus journals, this and that. So often I mean, on a kind of a weekly basis, I review the research papers for these journals, and I get these papers from different authors from in the world, those who claim that they have used the grounded theory. They say they have used the grounded theory. But when I ask the question, what version of the grounded theory you use, they are speechless. Even sometimes in our master's panels, the Viva panels, our candidates come and say, okay, I have employed the grounded theory, but I ask the question, which version? There are different versions of the grounded theory. There are different versions of the grounded theory. We have to be very careful. We have to be very careful when it comes to the grounded theory. Grounded theory is an epistemology. It's a bigger thing, and you need to give me the precise details of what methodology you are going to follow, right? So I bring you this example. Grounded theory, there are 3 different types of grounded theory, right? And People are not aware of it. People just read about the glass and straws, 1967, the discovery of grounded theory. But there's an issue with it. Why? Because you always have to tell what version of the grounded theory you're using, because simply saying, I do grounded theory is not enough. Now, when it comes to this mountain example, one version of the grounded theory is that you need to climb. Okay, your objective is to climb this mountain. One version of the grounded theory gives you the clear steps take in order to climb this mountain. Clear process, a nice recipe. These are the precise steps you have to follow. Maybe okay, that is one version of the grounded theory. Whereas another version of the grounded theory would tell you, well, just go about, climb and have fun, take some selfies, bring a dog, take snacks. That is the lenient version of the grounded theory. The classical approach, The previous one, it is interpretive approach, interpretistic. And the third version of the grounded theory would say, it depends on how you construct this mountain. Now it is your job. It's going to be your problem. You're going to construct the mountain. And you construct a certain route, and this has effect on the way you climb. So there are different versions of the grounded theory. Okay, let's take them one by one. Glass and Straws, way back 1967, they wrote this nice book. We actually call it the season of love, because 1960s they had this Vietnam War, and all the gypsies and all that. There was a kind of a youth spring in Americas. They were protesting against it, right? The Vietnamese invasion. So the love and the peace and all these things were there. So the Glass and Straws, they invented the grounded theory that by publishing this book, historic book, The Discovery of Grounded Theory. However, later on, the Glasser, approximately 11 years later, he introduced another book, another version of it, the theoretical sensitivity, whereas he, as kind of a small book, where he said, in grounded theory, the researchers should have a clear sense towards the idea or the data, right, with respect to the theories that they are going to build. That is the occasion where we allowed the interpretivism to walk into the grounded theory. Because in interpretivism, we enable the researchers to use their personal experience, personal knowledge to interpret the data. In the quantitative, you can never think of that. Because in quantitative methods, you're following a constructionist research approach, and the data has a separate existence from the researcher. But in the grounded theory, no, it is not like that. Way back in 1990, Strauss and Corbin wrote a book on the basics of grounded theory method, which made the Glasser really mad. In 1992, he wrote another book saying emergence versus forcing basics of grounded theory approach, and he demanded that the Strauss and Corbin should withdraw this book. Because why? The Strauss and Corbin, through their book in the 1990, introduced a clear steps in climbing up the mountain. Glass did not like it. So we call this the Glasserian approach, and this is the Straussian approach. And later on, Chalmers, like little later, right, in a neutral way, wrote another nice book, The Constructivist Grounded Theory. And there's a little bit of the Glassers in it, there's a little bit of the Straussers in it, right? And no one apparently discriminated the Chalmers work in 2004. Luckily, we have only Chalmers living now in the world, right? Both Glass and Strauss are fighting in the heaven. So there are different versions of the grounded theory, and now we are going to talk about it. The interpretive grounded theory I want to touch first, which is the biggest school of ground theory, which is widely accepted by the academia. The Straussian method believes that in the grounded theory, the researchers need to follow an interpretivistic approach, whereas you go to the field, you identify what are the cases, what are the important facts, figures, and thereafter you have to interpret them. It's the largest school, and they introduce the coding steps based on constant comparison, the open coding, focus coding, and the axial coding. And they were highly focused on the theory. They said, okay, this is how theory need to be developed, right? And the researchers should always keep in mind that they're developing a theory. And what to do in open coding? The events or the actions, interaction, what you really have to do in the open coding. The Strauss and Corbin nicely explain simply. So they introduce several steps. Number one, the open coding, ask a specific and consistent questions from the respondents. Say, you're asking one question from one respondent, and if you're going to ask a different question from the second respondent, how are you going to compare the data? So there should be a consistency between the questions that you're going to ask from your respondents. And number two, code precisely. When you are going to code your data, you must know where you're going to put your data. What data should be going into which code? Coding precisely. And number three, write the reflections, memos. Think what you're doing. Identify what you feel, the feelings. And the Straussian approach said, okay, you need to minimize the assumptions. You need the facts. Through facts, you need to do the validation. And the step two is the axial coding. It is linking the concepts or the categories to data and concepts or categories for exploration of the following properties. What are we going to do? What are we going to combine together? The conditions relevant to your research problems, the context relevant to your research problem or your research objective, and the consequences of it, the strategies and the symbolic interactions, and sometimes the symbolic interactions. The people, sometimes, okay, people might not speak, but using the gestures and postures, they will communicate it. And the Gracerian approach said, okay, you need to use that as well. Another example, okay, you go to Alimankada and we have these the Corporal Hasalaka Gamini's war memorial. What type of a message does it really communicate to the Sinhala people and to the Hindu people? Two different messages at the same time. Okay, so in interpretism, in the Gracerian approach, they said pay attention to that. So it will help you to construct the theories and the patterns and the relationships between the data. The step three is selective coding, which is integration of all the categories in the theory. Integration of all the categories in the theory, because the theory is like a tree. In my first example, theory is like a tree. You cannot say, okay, this is the tree, but it will not sound very strong. You need to explain the features of the tree to make it strong. Just like that, you need to explain the leaves, the fruits, the flowers, the branches, the roots, the trunks, the shade, and the birds living in it. And the grouped around a core category, the other important thing. You should always keep in mind, what is my theory? What is its features and how it is constituted and how we can combine them together. And thereafter, we have the building the storyline around this category. Whatever the data you're going to present, whatever the arguments you're going to bring in, has to contribute to the establishment of the theory. It is important. There's another nice article that I highly recommend you to read. What theory is not. I cannot remember the author, somewhere 2006, right? I will pass it down to Dilipa madam, right? And you might get into it. Please read and understand what is a theory, right? And thereafter, you can decide whether you're going to follow the grounded theory or not. And the steps in interpretive grounded theory, the data immersion is number one. You read the entire transcription. And the step two is coding. You identify the small pieces of information, important information. You group them together, right? Creating of the categories. And similar categories are again grouped to make the themes. And the themes are finally combined to make a theory. So these are the steps in the interpretive grounded theory. So this particular paper I recommend you to read, whereas we use this interpretivistic approach. Actually, we started with the thematic analysis, but finally we ended up in contributing to the tourist gaze theory, right? You can read it. I will pass that paper to you as well, where how we have opened or how we have identified the free codes or the open codes, and how we have combined them together to call it the focus codes, and how to develop the themes, right? And all the steps that we took are clearly presented in this particular research paper. And the tourism management perspective is one of the top 10 tourism journals in the world, published by the Elsevier's. Right. Number two, I come to the classical grounded theory. The Glasserian approach. The Glasserian approach, his arguments are basically based on the theoretical sensitivity. The theoretical sensitivity means that through data gathering and analysis, researchers are able to discover relationship between their categories, and that lead them to construct a grounded theory that fits, works with, and is relevant to the field under study. Theoretical sensitivity, which means, again, in layman words, you should always keep your research in mind, your research problem in mind, in data collection, in data analysis, and especially in the theory building. Starting from the open coding, focus coding, in every step you have to keep it. You have to have a kind of sense towards the theory, sense towards the data, and it will help you to build your own theory, the classical grounded theory. So, and here, they introduce grounded theory as a methodology, not as an epistemology. Why? They said everything is in data. All is data, and you can and here the Glasser does not define what data is. He said everything. You can, if it's an observation, yes, you can take it. And if it's something that you hear, yes, you can take it. If it is an interview, this, that, almost anything. That's the recommendation. It's kind of complex, I know. It's kind of complex. However, it also enables the researcher to break free from the conventional data paradigms or the frameworks. So this is the, if you're going to use a novel data collection method, if you're going to have a kind of a totally new data set, right? No one has ever used that before, that data particular source. Here, please cite the Glasser's theoretical sensitivity, 1978. You have the back here, right? And you can use both qualitative and the quantitative data here, according to the Glasser. Let it be statistics, let it be Boolean algebra, the binaries, yes, you can use it. And here they say no need of transcribing. Now, earlier in interpretistic grounded theory, the transcribing process is essential and it is mandatory. And again, in my tourism management perspective paper, we did the transcribing thing. We took the written information. But here the glass says, no, there's no need of it. There's no need of it. You can keep on listening to the recording and doing the coding and build the theory. That is one way. That is one way of doing your analysis using the grounded theory. And it is less formalized compared to Strauss and Corbin in 1990. We have to understand that. And this is not as equally accepted compared to the interpretivistic grounded theory, remember. But if you think you need to have a kind of a slow pace to go, and if you do not need to stick into the rules and the guidelines of these old researchers and the philosophers, well, okay, classical grounded theory is recommended to you because it is very flexible. But remember, when you're going to select a methodology like this, you need to again justify why you have selected it and who else have used it. Who else have used it? Otherwise, your research, your examiners or the reviewers will turn around and ask why you selected it. And if he asks the question at your viva or the proposal defense, you'll be in a bigger trouble. And the Glasser said there are 18 different coding families, 18. But Corbin and Strauss said 3 coding families, the open and the focus and the action. But here they said 18 of them. So this is another major difference between the Glasserian approach and the Straussian approach. So it is up to you. 2 different methods. And however, in both cases, both Glasser and the Strauss, both of them agreed that the grounded theory should have the constant comparison. Now here, in 1992, you may remember, right? I quoted some books earlier. In 1990, Strauss and Corbin, they wrote a book about the basics of the grounded theory methodology, about which the Glasser was very, very unhappy. And he was very unprofessional. And in 1992, he wrote a new book, the emergence and forcing in the grounded theory. A small book. Through that book, he challenged. He insulted. He insulted rather, yeah, the Strauss and Corbin, saying that now this is a direct quotation from that book. The Strauss method of labeling and then grouping is totally unnecessary. Grouping is totally unnecessary, laborious, and it's a waste of time. I don't know whether we can use that tone in the modern day writing. No, it is not accepted. It is ethically, it is not accepted. But Glasser used that words to challenge the notions developed by the Strasser and Corbin in 1990. So see, they started peacefully during the season of love way back in 1967, but thereafter found their own ways to develop this wonderful theory, the grounded theory. And finally, they ended up with fighting. Well, we as postgraduate or the masters or the PhD students should not be concerned about their fights, because we are so little when it comes to our research, our scopes. Let the big men do the big fights, and okay, let's try to stick to the simple theories, right, and follow the steps that they have recommended. So am I again, the other recommendation is that please don't try to get yourself in the mid of the Glasserian approach and the Straussian approach. Select either one, my personal recommendation is the Straussian approach, whereas you have some clear steps recommended in the grounded theory, starting from the coding. So you can read for information about the book written by both Strauss and the Corbin, the basics of the grounded theory methodology, available free in the internet. You can just type and get the book. Finally, we come to the constructivist grounded theory, introduced by Chalmers 2004, relatively a novel book, whereas the Chalmers used a constructivist approach, and she said, the researcher should physically and psychologically should involve in constructing the new knowledge. There should be a co-construction, not only the unit of analysis, but also the observer, the analyzer, the researcher himself, put himself into the research context to make the meaningful guesses, meaningful assumptions of the research phenomena under investigation. The researcher as co-instructor of meaning, co-constructor of meaning. That the data is not just pulled out from subjects, but rather co-constructed through interactions. So you be with them. Maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks, maybe 6 months. Then you feel why the people behave like that. If you have the social exchange theory, and some other, maybe the behavior theories, the constructivist grounded theory will be very useful for your further studies. And the combination of Glass and the Strauss in procedure, they have the open coding, axial coding, which was recommended by the Glasses, sorry, the Strausses, and the constant comparison, and the theoretical sensitivity, which was introduced by the Glasses. So both the features of both these scholars have been absorbed by the Chalmers when she was writing this book, Constructivist Grounded Theory. And again, the Chalmers highly recommended the researchers to focus on the context, because theory development may significantly vary from the context to context, the research context, right? And the complexities, the more the complex the research problem is, the possibility of making a comprehensive theory is very high. There's a bigger possibility. And therefore, we have the liveliness, the factor liveliness. You need to actively step into that research arena, research context, to absorb the meaning of the world of knowledge we are talking. And it is not as procedural as Strauss and Coburn, whereas the Strauss said, okay, you have the open coordinator, follow that, and thereafter you have to go for the category development and then the axial. But no, again, Chalmers, no, it did not recommend that directly. And it gives the possibility of multiple meanings and multiple theories. Why multiple meanings? Because Chalmers said, okay, if you have one particular social phenomena, social incident, a research problem, okay, you get one researcher and you are asking that researcher to go to the left-hand side and observe that phenomena, and he will give you one interpretation. And you ask the second researcher to go to the right-hand side and give an interpretation, and he will give you a second interpretation. So, according to the constructivist grounded theory, it is possible, only here it is possible that you develop in two different theories. Now, you have some idea. The classical approach, the interpretivistic approach, and the constructivist approach in the grounded theory. And remember, from research context to context, it might vary, and from research problem to problem, it might vary. Right. I'm going to skip this part the grounded theory steps further explained. Actually, this has been already given to you. I included in my presentation, and here these particular slides further explains the steps recommended by the Strauss and Corbin in 1990 through their book on the basics of the grounded theory methodology. The steps, there are like 5 steps what you have to be doing. And okay, then here I touch here the issues with the grounded theory. Number one, the grounded theory method tend to produce large amount of data, often difficult to manage. This is one of the main claims made by the researchers, but I do not agree. Now we have the modern methods, including the in vivo, including the Atlas TI, including the Leishman's. Okay, these are qualitative data analysis softwares, and these softwares allows you to identify and analyze the data qualitatively, even some comprehensive data. And I'm using the in vivo software, and I can upload like thousands of research articles into my software and analyze them within a couple of seconds. And I have some dozens of big ebooks uploaded into my software, and I'm using just a couple of seconds again to analyze the data. And researchers need to be skillful in using the grounded theory method. Why? Say the codes, right? I told you about the manifest content and the latent content. You see one thing in the surface, but you see something else underneath, the meanings behind the word. So you need to train the researchers, you need to train the interpreters, right? The data collectors, to get the true meanings out of all this the data, right? And there are no standard rules to follow for the identification of categories. Yes, that is subjective, that is different from person to person. For example, I give my data set to Nimal, one of my students, and I give the same data set to Kamal, another student, and I ask them both to analyze the data using the grounded theory. And I'm sure, I'm more than 100% sure, those two will deliver me two different results. So remember, in qualitative research, it is subjective. That depends according to the knowledge and the experience and the level of exposure of the researcher into these different disciplines, methodologies, epistemologies, etc. So the conclusion, the qualitative research and the researchers attempt to shed light on less investigated social phenomena, thereby contribute to the body of knowledge. Especially the qualitative research is important because it is the place where you generate the new theories or the new knowledge. In quantitative research, basically you test and you identify the impact, or you try to identify the relationship of the already established arguments. It is already there. But in qualitative research, you try to find something new. And in grounded theory, in its different versions, allows the researchers to generate new knowledge by developing theories. And unlike other methodologies, grounded theory now has 3 methods. I just explained you 3 methods. I introduced you 3 methods. And according to your requirements, you can select whatever the best suit for your study. And it is a very strong epistemology of the method, which is subject to great debates between the different schools of thoughts, including the Glassers and the Strauss and the Corbin and the Chalmers, right? They are still doubting, right? They're still arguing about it, and more new scholars, prominent scholars are entering into those dialogues. So it is there, right? It is unlike the quantitative methods. If you get the cron biofast, if you get the correlation values, regression values, okay, there are no arguments of it. Yes, there are few arguments about the threshold values, this and that, but compared to the qualitative research, that's nothing. So that brings me to the conclusion of my short lecture of the introduction to the qualitative research, the introduction to the grounded theory. And I have my YouTube channel. Mostly I have already uploaded a lot of materials about the qualitative research in it. You are invited to visit it and get some idea about it, about the qualitative research. And you can also visit my Facebook page of Sri Lanka Research Community. And I have given you my email address as well. And some of my recent publications are listed here, and you can also have a quick look at it. Right. And I can spend like maybe another couple of minutes for the questions. Now it's already like 11 minutes after 9. If you have any. Okay, Mrs. Dilepa, I think we are good to wind up the session.
Hello, sir.
Yes, yes.
I'm Gayatri here.
Yeah, Gayatri.
I want to know, sir, are there any similarities? So I hope there are similarities between the thematic analysis and grounded theory, but
Yeah.
I can't identify exactly what is different between these two.
Thank you, Gayatri. You're the tourism Gayatri, right?
Ah, yes, yes, sir.
Okay, I know. Okay. Now, I told you about the steps that we have to follow. In the basic steps are similar in content analysis, thematic analysis, and also in the grounded theory. The first one is the open coding. In all these three versions, open coding, you have the interview transcription, you read it, and you identify the important pieces of information. That is open coding. It is all same in all these three methods. And second thing is the focus coding. In the focus coding, what you do is that you group the pieces of information that you identified during the previous step. Kaling karapu step එක අපේ findings අපි group කරන එක තමයි කරන්නේ focus codes වල. It is all same in all these three methods, but it is the place where you stop content analysis. එතනට අවිලා අපි content analysis නතර කරනවා. So one player is out of the game. And if you keep on combining the categories that you have developed, which means you are developing the eggshell codes or the themes.
Sir, the thing is, there are only one theme in grounded theory, and we are developing many themes in thematic analysis.
No. In thematic analysis, you can have, look at, I mean, the recommended number of themes. I mean, there's no rule of thumb. You can have like 2, you can have 3, 4, 5. That depends on the complexity of the nature of the of your problem, right? And in thematic analysis, you combine the focus codes. You have a couple of themes, and then there you stop. Then you start interpreting the data, and you finish writing your research paper. But in grounded theory, how we differ from the thematic analysis is that in you go a step further and you combine the themes together. And
okay, now I got it. Yeah.
Then you make the theory. That should always be one. But according to Chalmers, right, 2004, you can have multiple theories if you're following the Chalmers approach. Right, so it is the same path you have to follow, right? For further information, actually, I recommend you to go to my YouTube channel, and the this thematic analysis is explained both in Sinhala and the English with some examples. Yeah, please have a quick look.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yes.
Thank you very much, sir. And dear participant, I am here because I am also a new for qualitative analysis. I am, as you know, I am a quantitative researcher. So, but I am reading regarding these things time to time. But I learned a lot from Dr. Manoj today. I also thought that grounded theory is something one. First time I really understood that versions. So like that, when you read these things time to time and refer these videos, and you can keep some short notes regarding this, then you can learn grounded theory very clearly, I think. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Mrs. Diripa, and have a nice evening. Good night.
Good night, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Good night.
Thank you, sir.
so much.